You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm here today with Sean McCaffrey, who runs GSTV, which stands for Gas Station TV. And while my gas stations that I use tend to run it, I had no idea how big you guys were until I was sort of reintroduced to you guys. So for those people who don't know how big of a footprint you have, why don't you tell us the elevator pitch?
Yeah, for sure. So GSTV is a national video platform that meets consumers on their turf and their terms, if you will, at a natural stop on the consumer journey when they're fueling up. We're partners with a number of the major retail providers, big, small, and so on in the fuel and convenience space. And the network today is in 205 US markets. We reach 105 million adults every month as our unique viewership. So that's about 40% of US adults. So from the biggest cities to the smallest towns and everything in between. And we program and deliver, give or take, a 4-minute show every day at all those locations. Is a combination of news, sports, weather, other entertainment programming, and so on, combined with commercial advertising, both homegrown and through partnerships. And so it's national video delivery in an digital out-of-home, if you will, environment. And we've grown like crazy over the last couple of years and continue to grow. And thanks for having us on today to chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. And what's fascinating about the your sort of form of digital out of home, and you compare it with some of the other captive audience type platforms like Captivate, which is in elevators, right? You guys clearly timed your show to sort of the typical fuel fill up, whereas they have to time theirs to a typical elevator ride. I'm sort of curious, how you decide, what's in that show and how you get the eyeballs to the screens.
Sure. So it's a great question. We talk to consumers, I tend to say 3 to 5 minutes at a time, 3 to 5 times a month. So 15 to 20 minutes of uninterrupted attention and engagement. And that's a pretty high bar. If I'm going to give up 15 to 20 minutes of my life today to anybody, it better be worth it. At the same time, it's not programming that you go personally reach out for, like in your Netflix queue or in a social media feed. So we start with our consumer base. So we know a lot about those 105 million people from a geo, demo, and behavioral standpoint. So think of a beach town versus an urban center. Think about, the cold weather season versus summer. And think of each station essentially as an addressable household. It's got a personality with all sorts of targeting demographics. So the same targeting information we might use for advertising campaigns is how we think about the show. So a really basic example is music. It's logical. You think about music and driving really go hand in hand. When you look at the data, it shows up that our audience listens to a lot more podcasts, a lot more rock and roll, a lot more streaming music, et cetera, et cetera. So from a consumer standpoint, you have permission to be there. Whether your favorite music is metal or country or anything in between, music and driving endemically fit. So it's one example. Food content's another one. Between the fuel and convenience stations, and then immediately following the 3 biggest. This will win you a bet with a friend. The 3 biggest consumer journeys after people fuel up are grocery, big box, and QSR. So between those 3 and the convenience store, it's quite literally true that our audience eats a lot. So food content makes a lot of sense. So, and the list goes on. And so we're not a hard news network. You're not going to see, the latest breaking political information from us. If you're a news junkie, in that sense, you have 20 places to get it. But we try to entertain, engage, inform, and deliver some value to consumers. And otherwise, what would be kind of a moment of dead air where there's an opportunity for them to drive away with some value, get a promotion or an amenity from the retailer or other things like that.
Great. So clearly you're ad supported, right? And so should marketers think of you guys as more as sort of digital out of home or outdoor, or should they think of you more like OTT video, or are you really sort of a beast of your own?
So yeah, I think there's a challenge in being a platform of one, which to some degree we are, and that you sort of are so different, people don't know what to do with you. I look to our customer base, and over the last couple of years, what we've seen is our strategy conversations, our comms planning conversations with brands migrate from what traditionally is the digital out-of-home use case, which is mostly digital signage. It's a digital billboard, a digital screen in Times Square, that sort of thing, to something more akin to digital video, which is a content-driven marketplace, a contextually driven marketplace. And we're not producing first-run programming like you're going to see on Peacock, for example, or Disney Plus. At the same time, it's consistent with what people think about as digital video when it comes to content and commercial experience. As much as it's a sort of a cliche term, snackable content, short form content, in a way that our show feels, I think, very much like a digital or social feed, and has many of the similar partners. And then from a measurement standpoint, we have data signals in our experience that people can target and measure very much how they're used to in digital video. Digital out of home, I think, often is still considered digital signage, where it's one to many, it's not that measurable, it's not that targetable. And I'm certainly not going to debate the merits of all of that, because there's big differences of opinions. But where we see our growth coming from is the clients who have taken a more omni-channel view on digital video. So whether that's on the living room wall, whether it's GSTV, whether it's your mobile device, et cetera, it ultimately is about the right place, right time, right moment for a consumer. And we have people do content integrations, sponsored content, same sort of things they would do with other digital video platforms. So we don't really care how we're labeled, but what we've seen advertisers tell us is we play fairly in sort of these, if you're going to have a digital out of home and a digital video world, we kind of play fairly in both. It depends on the client and the KPIs. If you need to win it, if you think of us as sort of a retail media extension for digital out of home, we can help you win at C stores, but also grocery and big box. If you think about us as a contextual moment to talk to someone about a higher consideration purchase, like a car or a credit card, or go this weekend to see the latest movie, I think we get more digital video strategy for those sorts of advertisers.
Cool. You recently announced the launch of the Amplifier Media Retail Media Network. Is that an extension beyond the gas station? So tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's something we're excited about. So I think all of us in the media and marketing industry get a little overwhelmed by buzzword bingo at times as you pick up the trades, and every 6 months or every year, there's a different sort of shiny object we're all following. And over the last couple of years, it goes back to your last question, sort of where do we fit and where are we valuable? Right. And over the last couple of years, as marketers have been talking to us about sort of the evolution of retail media, it's that basic question of right place, right time, right moment for a consumer, but it's also about connecting, their media buy and their first party data and so on to a direct business outcome. And so we drive great sales results for CPG partners across the fuel and convenience space. But then right after we have a consumer, they're very often going to a grocery store, a big box retailer, et cetera, and spending a lot more money. Fuel day is kind of a surrogate for this much bigger shopping day. So we don't have the first party data, of course, or the retail doors like a Walmart, let's say, owns, or a Target owns, but we're absolutely on that same physical consumer journey in the way people think about retail media. So based on 40 plus campaigns we've run over the last 2 years with different CPG marketers, what we've had marketers feedback to us as far as we really want to think about you guys in a retail media way, help us understand that. We launched the Amplify platform, which comes on the heels of our Octane Insights platform, our Ignite Content Studio, as really a way for marketers to understand, either use our data relationships or your own first-party data to consider targeting with GSTV. And then we build a campaign, if it's something as straightforward as ads, or if it's content integration, whatever, and then how to measure on the back end with partners like Catalina and IRI that are very, household name, if you will, measurement partners for CPG. So it's something where, and we brought in a subject matter expert, if you will, from the retail space. Crystal joined us from SCJ most recently and has spent more time at other CPG marketers, where someone who has actually walked the halls of a highly matrixed, big, national and global CPG marketer understands sales dollar, brand dollar, all of the different zones of retail marketing, et cetera. And how can we be a better partner to the CPG space? Because ultimately, whether it's a Super Bowl ad or a coupon or a retail media dollar, these guys need to grow their businesses. And sometimes that's 1 or 2 percentage points of share for a very mature product. Sometimes it's a totally new category or launch product. And what we've seen is sort of what we're hearing from brands too is there's interesting competitive sets these days. Like you think about, you walk into a convenience store or a grocery store and all of the juices are in the same section and all of the, produce is in the same section. But as you think about consumer behavior changing, we've had a few brands mention to us, well, there's like keto and paleo diets, for example, have made meat snacks and Greek yogurt and granola bars sort of now the same competitive set because you're thinking about living a certain lifestyle and diet. So short version is Amplify is our answer to the retail media strategy to try to help marketers understand how to best use our platform. And we launched it off of a couple of years of studies and understanding and in real client feedback. So it's something we're excited about. And it's just meant to be one more way that marketers can understand how to easily leverage our platform.
Cool. Well, one question I've got for you, it really has more to do with what you think might happen in the future. During the pandemic, menus and restaurants sort of rescued the QR code from oblivion. And, we started using it within my Did It team in direct mail at the hyper-personalized level. We started putting outdoor advertising with QR codes on it to try to turn outdoor into a little bit more of a direct response kind of an ad unit. And certainly walking through Grand Central and Penn Station in Manhattan, I see a lot of QR codes on outdoor, but you're sort of a little bit more, snackable content. So I'm curious whether you anticipate, some of your advertisers starting to experiment with QR codes, because sort of the culmination of the QR code comeback was during the Super Bowl, right? When Coinbase decided to make that their entire ad, right?
Sure.
So is it back to stay? Is it still a fad? Do you think people will use it in direct response modalities as marketers?
It's a great question. And it was to my earlier comment about sort of buzzword bingo. It was fun to wake up the day after the Super Bowl and read the marketing sort of Twitter debate about whether Coinbase was right, wrong, effective, not effective. As a consumer, I think QR codes are here to stay. I think much like 1-800 numbers, much like URLs, they're something that can be used for good or for evil. Like if you're going to put a QR code on things and point me to somewhere with no value, there's no point. If you're gonna put a QR code on something and actually give me value, that's interesting. For example, with us, I mentioned music and driving go hand in hand. And you think about all the beach and lake towns all over America in the summertime, and sort of the Thursday to Sunday population is wholly different than that town on a Tuesday or in January. So if you're a beverage brand and you have a big bet on summer music, and you want a consumer to be able to drive away with sort of the summer driving playlist or the summer beach weekend, special music offer, a QR code is a really easy way to make our experience shoppable or our experience, interactive. We have seen clients do that already in, of all categories, recruitment. So we have a major advertiser that spends a bunch of money with us throughout the year for recruitment all over the country, was kind enough to share with us this past fall. They use an SMS call to action in their 15-second video ad, text 1234 to whatever. They switched to an always-on QR code in their 15-second video ad. And after running for 60 days with the QR codes, they were kind enough to tell us they saw a 40 times increase in response to the ad via QR codes. And we had kind of been debating internally last summer, much your question, like how trained in is this behavior? Yeah. So for us, we want to create a show that is valuable to consumers, valuable to retailers, and valuable to brands and agencies. Our advice to brands and agencies is don't just throw a QR code on for the sake of it, sure. But in our experience, if you want to serve them an immediate call to action, let them walk away with value. If the 15-second ad is a teaser for the trailer, you want them to walk away with the entire full-length trailer, all these sort of examples, then sure, of course, leverage a QR code. It's one of the things that our content studio can do for you. Most big advertisers or agencies obviously are building this into their campaigns. And I'm curious to see where it goes as a consumer. I mean, I don't think it's going away. And it's saving restaurants money and printing menus. It's helping us, access information faster. And I asked an agency friend sort of their view on it, and they raised the point that in a weird way, it's more privacy compliant than text. In other words, like I think we've all been spammed with text. So when you give your phone number to a company or a brand or a website, you're now suddenly like, well, now how many texts am I going to get? With a QR code, it's a one-way thing where you choose to get some information, but you're not suddenly sort of going to get spammed with things. At least done right. Obviously, it's trackable once you log in. But I think they're here to stay. And for our experience, it's not a question of sort of a binary, should you use them or not. It's, again, back to, are you going to use them the right way to provide some value to consumers?
Great. So I guess people should consider another tool in the toolbox, but don't abuse it, just like email can be abused or SMS can be abused.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
just use it in the right way.
I think that's a spot on point of view for sure.
So you mentioned that there are a lot of audiences at different stations, obviously geographically, and sometimes time shifts, right? Days of the week change the audience. Yeah. So that brings to mind my question, because I haven't experienced you guys everywhere. So to what extent is the snackable content hyper-personalized? Like, is it down to the station level? Is it like a group of 20 stations or 100 stations will get the same feed? And sort of how is that decision made?
Yeah, so we think about every station essentially as an addressable household, and so we could go crazy and all close to 30,000 locations we have and hundreds of thousands of screens and so on. We could every screen and every station's IP addressable, so we could literally have a different feed or a different show at every screen, not just at every station. We use the analogy of an addressable household in the sense that, I might be in the living room with my children or my mother-in-law or whatever, but our household is targeted by so many things. And so we think that's the right way to serve content and to customize within reason. I don't think in the digital out-of-home space a decade ago or even 2 decades ago, people always use the analogy of Minority Report. I'm going to walk around and screens will recognize me and all that. I don't think that's ever going to happen, nor is the world really ready for that. And so the idea that you might roll up to our screen and consume our content and watch our show and it all be truly personalized to you individually versus you at a particular moment in time, geography, location, et cetera, as a part of a cohort, if you will, at that station. We think that's the right balance of, first and foremost, privacy compliance. We're not collecting or ingesting first-party data in that sense. And number two, the level of customization that actually is useful. I mean, sports is a great example. We work with a number of the major sports leagues, a couple of sports networks. If we're running NFL highlights, sure, if you're a football fan, they matter everywhere, but Detroit fans would care a lot more about Lions highlights, Chicago fans would care a lot more about Bears highlights. So there's ways to do sort of personalization at scale, if you will, that I don't think is, strictly speaking, a one-to-one. So we try to balance that. Some of our content runs everywhere, every day, and is updated a couple times a day. Some of it runs weekly everywhere. Some of it runs at a selected group of stations based on the content partner, the ad buy, the seasonality. And so this is everything that our broadcast and content studio and ad ops team do. They manage all that delivery in a way that ideally creates a positive user experience for the consumer and in our brand partners from the sponsorship standpoint.
Great. So you mentioned brand partners and you've got the content studio. Has the mix of sort of DR advertisers versus brand or upper funnel advertisers changed over the last couple of years, or has it been fairly consistent?
It's been fairly constant. Our category mix has continued to diversify. I think, so I grew up in audio and out-of-home businesses where we literally worked with everybody from luxury goods to travel to pharma to hospitality and so on. I think for our business, classically, the assumption would be, well, if I need to win at fuel and convenience, I'll call you guys. If I'm selling snacks or beverages, let's say. And while that's true, and we're a huge driver of that channel, fuel and convenience is more than 3% of US GDP. What we see now over the last couple of years is advertisers in like financial services and entertainment and so on, realizing this is a pretty contextual moment to talk to consumers about stuff. Financial services, for example, every one of our ad impressions actually involves a payment transaction on a day where they spend more money standing next to an expensive purchase, their vehicle. So if you want to talk to a consumer about their relationship to money, it's a pretty good contextual moment. And so we are also a very habitualized serial engagement week in and week out. So what I would say for more upper funnel conversations, highly considered purchases, cars, credit cards, that sort of thing, it's a very regular opportunity to kind of move someone down the funnel, if you will, and move them from awareness to consideration and intent and all that. And then for the lower funnel things, literally go inside and buy it now, or for a QSR partner, try to steal a taco occasion and make it a burger occasion, or the battle for breakfast in QSR, or the seltzer, battles that are sort of going on in hard seltzers. It's a very applicable call to action moment. So we work, I would say, across the spectrum. We don't have a buy it now button in the sense of a true sort of social feed. But I think with the changes over the last year and the next couple between cookies and IDFAs and so on, it goes back to your earlier question about, are we digital out of home? Are we digital video? What we're finding from brands and agencies is sort of this digital muscle memory that they're used to using now in terms of targeting and attribution and so on. They expect to be able to apply everywhere, but they apply it a little differently in CTV versus GSTV, versus mobile video or search or that sort of thing. So we work both ends of the spectrum, if you will, from sort of upper and lower funnel. And I think it's the contextual element of how people are now considering us that's changed over the last couple of years. And our growth has come from across the board. I wouldn't say there's one particular category or one particular client where they've grown at 500% converse to everybody else that's grown at 50 or something like that.
Well, one idea just popped into my head, and I'm curious if you've already thought about it or planned for it, which is, regardless of who's actually to blame for oil prices just fluctuating, and I tend to blame OPEC more than anybody, but regardless of who's really to blame, obviously that ends up manifesting itself at the pump, and it is considered a sort of political issue, regardless of who's really to blame. And so do you anticipate getting a surge of political advertising requests come election time?
So we have had political advertising in the last couple of cycles. We do take political advertising. Our retail partners have the opportunity to opt out of that. We're citizens of the communities in which we operate, right? And they want a positive consumer experience. So we don't take attack ads. We don't take the sort of he or she or they are to blame for it sort of thing. So we're well aware that to some degree opts us out of a lot of political advertising, right, and we're okay with that. I think for better or worse, political advertising has gotten worse over the last couple of decades, at least speaking as one consumer. And the experience we create for our retail partners, the experience we want to deliver for our brand partners, is not one where we want divisions to come into play. I think the best politicians are those that unite us versus divide us, and not to get too aspirational about our show, but I think our attitude is the same. It's meant to drive connection and value and entertainment, not be that disruptive. But it is, what's interesting with gas prices is a bit counterintuitively is it drives more visits for us and it drives more frequency, because if you think about when gas is cheap, drivers will often let their car get close to empty and then fill up an entire tank. As gas gets more expensive and people are naturally more budget and price conscious, they'll throw in $20 or $30 or something like that. So it's a single digit percentage. It's not a huge swing, but higher gas prices actually drives our frequency up a little bit, versus I think a bit counterintuitively, people naturally assume it would drive less visits to the gas station.
Cool. One final question has more to do with sort of the way in which your content team recommends content be communicated, which is, in sort of the skippable online video ad formats, you tend to really, really front load the ad. So it's like an inverted pyramid style story. Headline, bang, here it is. And then you sort of add the stuff afterwards. Yep. Whereas like in sort of movie style or storytelling, you're telling a story beginning to end. And so you don't get the butler did it till the end. Yep. Whereas the other words, the headline is the butler did it, right? So, in a gas station fueling environment, right? And you want to get a brand message across, are you going to do it like a skippable YouTube ad where you're going to be like cram everything important into the first 5 seconds, or are you going to take more of a storytelling approach? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I love this question, first of all, because I think as an industry at times we talk so much about where to serve the ads and how to serve the ads and how to target the ads, and that we forget what you say is a huge part of the impact, right? Creative matters in a huge way. And so for us, you absolutely don't have to white knuckle those first 2 or 3 seconds and get it all out, get it all out before somebody hits skip. Our ads are always in view. You're paying for live human beings, verified with a financial grade transaction and so on and so on.
Right.
So what we tend to say is you can use the storytelling, to use your paradigm. You can use the storytelling content that you're planning for television or longer form, but we need to edit it appropriately for our space. In other words, if you're standing there for 3 or 4 minutes, even 30 seconds can seem like a lifetime if it's this sort of somewhat obtuse journey that I can't even pick up the brand.
Right.
And so for CPG, it's a great example. We've done probably 50 to 60 studies for mid to lower funnel metrics with CPG partners over the last few years. And the creative that performs better from a sales lift standpoint is absolutely creative that heroes the product. In other words, if it's a glistening bottle of a beverage dripping with ice on a hot summer day, that absolutely is more impactful to drive sales than something that features sort of a pop culture thing and there's only a logo for the brand at the end. What we often do, we do some true content and spot creation for our partners. Oftentimes we'll get their 30 or 60 from other long form areas like television, and we'll do the edit down to a 15 with a call to action at the end. But you have time to tell a story. I mean, if it's a compelling piece of content, don't worry about sort of the white knuckle digital video 2 or 3 second kind of thing before they have a chance to opt out, because our consumers will opt in and stay paying attention if it's good content. And we're seeing more and more brands recognize that. One of our big financial services partners that was in the Super Bowl, I happened to be chatting with them, and they said when they were shooting their Super Bowl ad, they were accounting for 30 different places they were going to use that digital video, from vertical to horizontal to sound, no sound, to 60 seconds to 6 seconds. So I think creative agencies and brands now are a lot smarter about understanding the different places and spaces that they might use creative. But I love the question because I feel like so often we forget that creative is still a massive part of how effective marketing and advertising works.
Yeah, and I think one area I constantly try to remind as many people who will listen is that good versus bad creative will make the difference between media being affordable and unaffordable.
For
right?
sure.
And these days, when certain media costs are escalating, especially bidded media, you may price yourself out of the market with bad creative.
Yeah.
So whereas great creative may allow you to go in and buy media that would otherwise be unaffordable, but because you're running great creative, all of a sudden all the KPIs line up.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think
And this is one of, I think, the interesting places of innovation in our space, that it used to be very, very difficult to pre-test creative, whether it was the really physical process, the focus groups and things like that, or in the digital world, it suddenly became cheap to sort of throw out 2 or 3 tests and see how they performed. But I think that's two ends of the extreme. I think across all media today, creative optimization is a challenge, that there's some smart innovation being done. And for us, alluding to some of your earlier questions, like some brands use us as an extension of linear, some brands use us as digital video, some use us as digital out of home and retail. So oftentimes, depending upon how creative is typically used in those spaces, we start with some of those biases, but folks are always willing to listen to, this is what it performs best with GSTV, so let us help you. It's one of the reasons we launched a content studio, an insights product, as well as Amplify, that we want to just make it easier for people to understand how to use us, and how to create value and ultimately drive their growth.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It's been great to learn the behind the scenes of all the GSTV content that I've been watching over the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for your viewership as well, and looking forward to chatting again. Take care.
Great.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.